Now, if that was why would you have to bribe people to get a vaccine?
Well, because the government has
That's a
invested
sad
so much money.
statement.
Well, the government has invested so much money. We're going to talk about that today. Hey,
The
everybody.
Biden administration
Linda.
is now supporting easing patents and other protections on COVID-19 vaccines, with the hope that that could speed vaccines to the world's poorest people. The pharmaceutical industry is warning this could create other problems, like vaccine.
Can you hear me, Maria?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, so the station's not too loud.
But most students are continuing to
I'm trying to check. Is the station too loud?
Chaparral can't hear you.
She can't hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, mute yourself, Bonnie. Okay. Can you hear me now, Chaparral?
Being pulled
Let me know
under
if you
the
can
rear
hear
of
me.
the treadmill. One child died following such an incident, and 29 others suffered.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Chaparral? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. So have a great show.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Yes.
guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
No problem. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Bye.
Cicadas have been gone for 17 years.
No answer from Pastor Brooks.
Okay, let me try and reach him myself. If not, we'll just go right to Dr. Deborah Holden.
Cicadas aren't
Okay.
Okay.
Once they get eyeball to eyeball, the male
Just keep
will
trying
go
him,
for
hon.
what we
Keep
call
trying
a
him,
courtship
please.
sauce.
That's the
Okay.
sound you hear when cicadas around.
If he's cool, she's going to flick her wings, make a little clicking noise. They're going to hook up,
She will move to the tips of small branches.
make slits in those branches,
Because it's
deposit
going right
20 to
into
30
voicemail.
eggs. She can
Because
lay
if we
up
don't
to
have
40
him
to
up,
100
then
eggs.
if we don't have him up,
the cicada
say
eggs
by
will mature and hatch,
10
and little
after.
nymphs will drop down from the tree into the
If
ground.
he's not
Okay.
up, then that's why I need you to get Dr. Deborah Holden on.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, everybody. How are you on Facebook? Hey, Linda. Hey, Barbara Jean. Hey, Kenneth. Hey, Carol. Hey, Daryl. Hey, Yolanda. R.A. Araya. Shirley from Philadelphia. Brian. Everybody, please like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. We have a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the profit in these vaccines. Something very big happened yesterday. The U.S., through our
We have some
president,
crash-related
Biden,
delays on I-80 this morning.
agreed
Westbound
that we should
traffic
have
is crawling from
waivers
I-55
on
to
the
Paducah
on these
interchange.
patents,
There's
so
a
that
collision
these
involving a
poorer
semi.
and developing
Looking at
countries,
about a
from
20 to 30
and
minute
so much
delay
of our wealth is
westbound.
derived from these places.
Eastbound, there is a
That's a
keeper's
whole,
delay
and that's a story that
from
you
around
should always keep
Ridge to
front of
Paducah
mind.
interchange to be
Well, anyway, now
foreshortened due to
they're going
that
to be able
crash.
to
We've been seeing
do
congestion
their
on
own,
Klein Avenue in northwest Indiana
make
this
their own,
morning in both
manufacture the
directions
vaccines
around the
on
toll
site,
road.
which
It's been
is
especially
important.
heavy
But
on the
that's something
northbound
that Bill
side.
Gates and the
Inbound
big
Stevenson, the
pharmaceutical
ramp to the
companies
inbound line is
have
in
been
traffic's getting congested now. Cicero to
against.
Pulaski as well. 23 minutes.
So, and then we're going to talk about this,
Lakeshore
the
Drive.
lifting of the
I'm Jim
ban
Calamansi.
on the
Tom Hartman. Republicans have been trying to cancel the minimum wage ever since it was enacted in the 1930s. They've successfully canceled any increases in it for over a decade. Republicans have gone out of their way to try and cancel Americans' health care. They've been on a Jeremiad against
How much
Obamacare.
time do you have, Paul?
They took that all the way to the Supreme Court twice.
A minute 23.
Okay, thank you so much.
Radio program. Weekdays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
We've all been spending more time indoors than usual, but FinishingChicago.com has an offer to update your interior. Whether your space is residential or commercial.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Up to 25% on painting and decorating. FinishingChicago.com has the most dynamic interior
Did we get,
spaces available. From industry-leading union
Still no answer.
Okay.
quality, efficiency,
If we don't get an answer, then we're going to go past him today.
Okay.
Visit FinishingChicago.com to find a contractor
Okay,
in your
let me just
area.
let that go.
This
Try and get
unprecedented
Dr.
access
Deborah
to
for holding
union
up,
quality
please.
labor at a reduced
Okay.
rate
Okay, thank
is
you.
only available for a limited time. Revitalize your spaces with fine decorative
30.
upgrades applied by the most knowledgeable craftspeople in the industry. Whether it's a new color or transforming your walls into something truly special, our contractors have all the options. Take advantage of FinishingChicago.com's Update Your Interior sale
15.
before they're gone. For up to 25% off your new finish, start with FinishingChicago.com.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts
5.
change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
We can change the world. Yes, we can. My name is Santita Jackson. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, coming to you from WCPT 820 in Chicago, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and all over the country and all over the world. Meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. We're also streaming on WCPT 820's page. Please, everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share. And if you would, please like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel. Like and subscribe over there and call us at 773 WCPT 773-763-9278. If you want to text me, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that. 773-763-WCPT 9278. So what do you think about the lifting of, well, our president has now decided to support the lifting of these bans on these vaccine patents, which is huge. It means these developing countries will be able to they'll be able to create the vaccines, develop the vaccines where they are. They won't have to wait on the big pharmaceutical countries of the West to give them the vaccines. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? That could be a big deal. I mean, that's something Dr. Fauci said he was agnostic about it. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Let's just get them to them. Bill Gates absolutely said no. What do you think about that? And what do you think about all of the profit in the making of the vaccines? I mean, and they absorbed none of the losses. The governments of the West gave the pharmaceutical companies the monies to develop the vaccines, to manufacture the vaccines, and now Pfizer, for example, is going to make $26.5 billion this year alone off of these vaccines. The companies that we cannot sue, by the way. It's a whole lot to talk about. And then we're going to talk about the lifting of this eviction moratorium. A lot of people can get thrown out of their apartments, out of their homes. What's going to happen? And it depends upon really if your state has a prohibition against that, you might be safe. But a lot of people are not going to be safe, everybody. A lot of people are not going to be safe. A lot of people are going to be tossed out of their homes as we're watching food prices rise. What is going to happen, everybody? What will happen? Oh, there's just so much to talk about today, so much on the Santita Jackson Show, and I want to hear from you. And what about our health? What about our health? COVID is not the number one killer in the United States. No, it's not. And what are we doing about really taking care of ourselves? We've got Dr. Deborah Furholden and Dr. Shanita Knighton talking to us about that in the next hour. But right now, before we go into COVID-19 and talking about raising those questions and talking about these patents and why this is such a big issue, particularly as we watch all of these deaths that are mounting in India, the second most populous country in the world, just losing so many people every day. Let us get to some of these headlines and let's see what's going on in the world. Chicago, we will have a high of 50 degrees and rain. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 61 degrees, partly cloudy. The NASDAQ closed down 51 points yesterday. The Dow closed up 97 points, and the S&P 500 closed up 2.9 points, everybody. Major League Baseball, the Twins won. The Rangers 3. Perhaps they'll redeem themselves today. The Twins face off for the team with the Rangers again today. The Cubs are triumphant over the Dodgers, 6-5. They'll be facing the Pirates today. And the White Sox were shut out by Cincinnati yesterday. Oh my goodness. Just have to wait a couple of days for them to work all of that out, everybody. Well, China has gotten a whirlwind with some of these. Let's go into this uproar over the vaccine patent waivers. Indeed, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the chief medical advisor to President Joe Biden, testified at a House hearing that he was quite agnostic as to whether the World Trade Organization should temporarily suspend coronavirus vaccine patents. Well, a transformative, hopeful event. That is what they said under pressure President Biden backed the COVID-19 patent waiver, everybody, in the face of mounting international pressure. The Biden administration on yesterday announced their support for waiving intellectual property protections for COVID-19 vaccines. What will that mean, everybody? Global health leaders are hailing this as a monumental moment because, indeed, America's leading this charge. Cry no tears, so farmer stocks plunged. That's interesting. Pharmaceutical stocks took a big hit because President Biden is supporting this patent vaccine waiver. So, what does that mean? Does that mean that if they held on to these vaccines, that they make more money as more people die? I don't know. In the meantime, a New York Times report showed how these rich countries signed away the opportunity to vaccinate the world as they gave the rights and gave the money to Big Pharma to develop the vaccines and for them to make all of the money. What do you think about that? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, well, while you're waiving patents, why don't you do it for insulin? Wow. In these hard economic times, many people are now having to use dog insulin on human beings. Wow, everybody. A federal judge has overturned the national eviction ban. Of course, we'll be talking about that too in the next hour. What will that mean? What will that mean for you? Eviction bans have been shown to cut the spread of COVID-19. It doesn't matter, even as grocery prices are spiking, more and more Americans will not have a place to stay. Kids will not have a place to stay. In the meantime, we're finding that COVID-19 can spur diabetes, everybody. It seems to me whatever your underlying conditions are, this brings it out. And now scientists are seeing a path for the coronavirus to invade the brain. Peloton has recalled all treadmills after reports of injuries and one death, everybody. Oh my gosh, that's too much. So everybody, call me. Let's talk. I want to talk to Dr. Deborah Holden. We are going to talk about these vaccines. We're going to talk about these vaccines. Something monumental happened, Dr. Deborah Holden. And we're going to bring on someone who's been looking at this. Oh, wow. He's been studying this for quite some time, just really looking at all of the profits in these vaccines. Indeed, many people are saying that Bill Gates has made intellectual property more important than public health because he has been ardent in his opposition to waiving these vaccine patents and allowing these poor countries, these developing countries, from which we derive so much of our wealth. The West gets so much of our wealth, the minerals from these so-called developing nations. That's where we get our wealth from. That's it. So, Dr. Deborah Holden, everyone is saying that this was a transformative moment for, after much pressure, for the president to say, you know what, I support the waiving of these vaccine patents. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, that's a good thing. When you got something good that the whole world needs, I think about what happened when we had HIV medications that just came out. It was a really sad state of affairs because the global need for antiretrovirals and many of those medications was far greater than the need in the U.S. But a lot of those medications were developed in the U.S. and they simply would not give it to other countries. They wouldn't give them the ability to make the medications themselves, nor would they give them the medication or sell it to them at a price point that they could afford. So we had tremendous need globally among people who needed those medications, and they just simply weren't able to get them. So, at this pandemic, this is like everybody's trying to push shared responsibility, right? You masking up isn't just about protecting you, it's about protecting, the people around you. Well, I think we have that same scenario with the vaccine. Having access to a safe and effective vaccine shouldn't be something that's an economic or a geographic or a national right. But that's, unfortunately, the way our global society operates. And that's what it's become. So I think the thinking is if we waive the patent, then other manufacturers in other parts of the world will be able to produce vaccines. And as well, without one company holding all the cards for a vaccine, it will open up the market and maybe encourage some better stewardship from some of these big pharmaceutical companies.
How do these patents work? I mean, because I just want to make sure that we have it right. Um, because this is something that Bill Gates absolutely said, I do not support this. And quite frankly, big pharmaceutical companies in the West did not support this, as we're watching absolute carnage in India, as we're watching the rise of the spread of coronavirus in these developing countries. What does, when you share this intellectual property, what does that do? You said you get a chance to make the vaccines on site.
Well, it's like having the recipe. And, a lot of people can take, not necessarily with the vaccine, but with, other medications, people can sort of reverse engineer these things. So patents prevent people from investing lots of money and time and resource and creating some new drug that then somebody else can just reverse engineer and make without, and get the benefit of that drug without having invested all the money and the time and the attention and having put all the work in. So I do think things like patents, which will protect intellectual property and things like that, are important. I don't think that applies here. We're in a global pandemic, number one. Number two, I'm not real clear on where the line is when we're talking about something that was in large part, if not exclusively, paid for by the U.S. government.
Which means
seems like the people
American
should hold
people.
the patent. Seems like we should all be able to split that money up. However much $1 billion, our tax dollars invested in and were made, we're cut that up and hand out stimmies based on that.
But see, wait a minute.
I
don't want to go. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go past that too fast, because the fact is, these pharmaceutical companies did not absorb much risk at all. They got paid by the government, that is, by the people, to develop these vaccines. So when they tell me, well, we're just giving them away, no, you're returning my investment. We paid for this. So you're not doing me a favor.
Yeah.
And now you're going to make billions upon billions. Because I think that, when we talk about intellectual property and all of this high-flown language, you just put it right down where we can understand it. It's the recipe. And our dollars paid for the recipe. And we paid and we gave it to these corporations. And then our government leaders and our media stars sell it. So that's what they've been doing. And then you tell me, when you're watching hundreds of thousands of people contract it every day, and you're watching millions of people die, and you won't share the recipe, you can't come up with a reason for that with me. And I want you all to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. That is just so selfish, and so many people have died, Deborah. They died because we wouldn't share the recipe.
Yeah.
Help me with that.
Yeah.
I don't know how they figure that out. I really don't.
My mama used to say you can't make sense of nonsense, and that doesn't make sense. But it speaks to who we are as a nation and as a society. Again, we clearly have placed a hierarchy on the value of human life. We value some lives more than others, and definitely that plays out on the global stage. And we just decided that poor and developing countries and the people that inhabit them as a global society are not as high up on the hierarchy of value. And that's unfair and it's unfortunate. It's not good humanitarianism. And I don't agree with it, but that's how things work. And this whole, supposed notion of a free market, it lends itself to things like this. Because you do have these companies who have very much a sense of mind. We did the work. It was our technology. We paid the scientists. We did this. And it's like, okay, well, in the U.S., the federal government paid for most of this. Everybody hails our girl, Dr. Kismika Corbett. Dr. Kismika Corbett was a postdoctoral fellow and now a staff scientist at the National Institute of Health, right? At the National Institute on Allergy and Infectious Diseases. That is under the umbrella of the National Institute of Health. That is under the umbrella of the Department of Health and Human Services. That is under the umbrella of the federal government.
Okay, so she works for the government.
Our tax dollars paid for all of this. She works for the government. Okay. Dr. Fauci works for the government. These are all government-sponsored. It's what's called an intramural research program. I'm an extramural researcher. I do research that's paid for by the government, but the research is conducted outside of the government. I'm not a government employee, and I'm not using government facilities to conduct my research. I'm a part of NIH's extramural research program. Then you've got a bunch of really smart people like Dr. Corbett and other in-house scientists who are both employed by, and their research happens at a government facility within a government agency. All of it is paid for by our tax dollars. All of it.
Let me read this to you from the New York. Let me read this to you from the New York Times in furtherance of your point, because I think we need to get clear on who paid for what and why this is not just some giveaway on these shots. This is something we already paid for. Rich countries signed away a chance to vaccinate the world. This is from March 21st, 2021. The rapid development of COVID-19 vaccines achieved at a record speed and financed by massive public funding. You did this. Y'all, everybody. In the United States, the European Union, they paid for it, and Britain represents a great triumph of the pandemic. Governments partnered with drug makers. Pouring in billions of dollars to procure, get raw materials, finance clinical trials, and retrofit factories. Billions more were committed to buy the finished product. These companies absorbed no risk. The American people, the Europeans, the British, they paid for it. The people paid for it. Then the government sponsored with them to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, okay, we'll buy it too. And the rest of the profit is on you. How can you lose with that kind of strategy? And then you have the nerve to hold on to a patent while people are dying? As you know, as I really started reading about this, Dr. Deborah Holden, as I think about you in this fight, you almost go hoarse trying to push on equity. This is what this is, and it's infuriating. As I'm watching all of these people, some brown to very dark people in India, they can't find enough fire to cremate these people, and we would not share the recipe. Who does that? Who does that?
But we've always been that way. We did it with HIV and AIDS. This is not new. This is not the first time that we've had access to something that would be life-saving. You know, HIV has a much higher mortality rate. I mean, it's not, as infectious as, an airborne, disease that's spread through droplets, right? The route of transmission is different, but it has a much higher mortality rate. And we withheld that. So this is not a new conversation. And these issues around equity, which, is my thing. Is this a world of fair play? Are important. But this is not new. This is not the first time that we've done this. And this is not the first time that government dollars will. And Dr. Fauci was around for all of that, too. Let's get that real straight. Dr. Fauci's been in his job for a very, very, very long time. The man is in his 80s.
40 years. Because he was most prominent in HIV, and the problem was getting the drugs distributed to Black people and to the Latino community. Then it was a problem. I'm like, it's the same problem. And we paid for the research. We paid for the drugs. And now, we're just sponsoring these companies and they won't share. Oh my goodness. So Pfizer alone, can make $26.5 billion this year, and then you are in a meeting that you were kind enough to share with us, and you said, "Oh yeah, they're trying to figure out how to. They don't have enough vials." They don't. I said to you yesterday. I said, "How can they not have enough? They're making nothing but money. They have no risk.
Yeah.
You can't sue them. What? How much do you need? Do you need my blood too?" I applaud the president for bending to the pressure, but be very clear, we would not be sharing this recipe for these shots if we did not pressure him like crazy. I got a couple of minutes before we bring on our guest to talk about this, because he has been doing a lot of research. James Love from the Knowledge Ecology International. It's a wonderful group out of Washington, D.C., and he's been talking about this, Dr. Deborah Verholden, about how Bill Gates is making money off of this. How are people making money off of this? I'm not picking on any one person today, Dr. Deborah Verholden, but when you're talking about equity, who does this? The last minute belongs to you before we go to break.
Well, this is an opportunity. I've been telling folks COVID, and I love how Pastor Tricia says it. She said COVID wasn't the problem. COVID was the snitch. It just told us a lot about what our existing problems were. It shined a light on many things. This is an issue that I think people need to take up.
1 minute.
This is a time to maybe revisit and reform some things that don't work, that might have had the good intention of encouraging, intellectual advancement and technological advancement and things like that, but instead have actually really created a very inequitable playing field in areas that should be a right, not a privilege. Everybody should have access to life-saving medications, especially in the midst of a pandemic.
30.
We've reserved it for the elite and the wealthy. And whether or not all Americans see that, there's a privilege that comes with being American, and you understand that when you spent time abroad and been in
15.
Parts of the world that are resource rich from a natural
10.
perspective, but very, very resource deprived.
Well,
5.
Other ways.
Stay right there, because we're going to talk more about this with James Love. Find out who's making money and how, what we can do about that. More of the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820 at AM 950 Radio. Meet up with my Santita Jackson Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson and Bridge Fame. Ooh, girl, I don't know why I started getting hot about this, but when I think about all of this money that these people are making, and I think about all of these people who are dying, ooh, wow. They're wrong for this. They're wrong for this, Deborah. They're wrong for this.
Yeah.
They're wrong for this. They've been wrong. Think about all the people who've died. And I'm glad that they've decided to share. But people have been outraged. It's like, wait a minute, this is crazy. I mean, how do you all do this? And then you see, look, and all this stuff is printed. But you know what, you guys, I work for you. That's why I'm me, Deborah and I think I'm certainly not on Dr. Deb's level. I just dig. And I'm always trying to connect the dots. So, oh, girl, I said, wait a minute, we're paying for this. But they're profiting from this. But so much, Boeing is basically a government-funded private company. So many of our companies, I mean, Amazon's got big government contracts. That's how these people make their money. They make their money off of you, but they're allowed to privately profit. And they can do with these profits whatever. They act as if they're standing on their own 2 feet, Deborah. And it's just a shame. I'm like, you're not standing on your own 2 feet. I'm standing you up. I'm not even propping you up. You're standing on my back. But not only if I need the jab, but if I need a therapeutic, I can't get it from you. We need to be having a discussion on universal single payer, on Medicare for all right now. They need to put that in play right now so everybody has access. Look, people are dying of everything else too. You and I, well, we're going to talk with that.
Yeah.
Talk about that with Dr. Knighton at the top of the hour. But it's like people dying of all kinds of stuff. Oh, whew. Oh, do we have Mr. Love with us? Paul? Did we get Mr. Love?
Just one moment. I'm talking to him right now.
Okay, thank you. Whew. So, okay. Wow. Wow. It's a lot. But just the thought of it. You know, when you think of, and then when you go to these countries.
All right, we have Mr. Love.
Okay, thank you. James Love?
Yes.
How are you? Santita Jackson, wonderful to hear your voice this morning.
It's nice to hear you.
Thank you. I've got Dr. Deborah Verholden. She said she wanted to stick around and hear what you had to say. She is one of the top epidemiologists in the world. She, in fact, comes out of Johns Hopkins. And they brought her to Michigan State University, where she is the Associate Dean for Public Health. She's creating their School of Public Health.
1 minute.
And we've been, just as a lead up to this conversation, we've been talking about the patent on these vaccines and these intellectual properties. And of course, you can break down just how much money has been made by Bill Gates and others. And so we cannot wait to hear from you, so you can tell us just what we're looking at, because I just think the thought of it it's infuriating to me. And then they would dare hold on
30
to these recipes, as Dr. Verholden put it. Like you hold on to it like it's yours to hold on to. Unbelievable.
I think the.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah, I think
15.
We're coming up.
10. 5.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Hey, everybody. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about these vaccine patents. That's been a real sticking point for some of the wealthiest companies and people all over the world. Should we share the vaccine patents? Should we share the recipes for vaccines with these developing nations all around the world? Should we? I mean, and you have something to say about it, because guess what? It is your money that paid for it. It is your money that paid for it. But let me let this gentleman, and Aaron, we're going to get to you in a hot second. But joining Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, brilliant, world-renowned epidemiologist, is James Love. He's the director of the Knowledge Ecology International Organization. And he's been arguing that the Gates Foundation is making a lot of money, and they've been really, Mr. Love, they've been calling the shots on this. And I just need you to explain to me, what is the deal with intellectual properties? That is the recipe for these vaccines. I think I just need to say it the way we can understand it. Intellectual properties knows the recipe for the vaccines. What has been the big deal, and why is it that President Biden saying, you know what, we need to share these patents? Why was that such a big deal?
Well, it was a big deal when yesterday when the president and Catherine Tai from USTR made their announcement that they're going to support measures to lift WTO rules on patents and other types of intellectual property. I want to clarify the comment on Bill Gates, because Bill Gates has been he's been supporting research in the area of infectious diseases, and he's been giving away money in this area. He has some investments of his own, but he's I think the problem he's had with the patents and with the sharing the know-how, what is often referred to as a recipe for the vaccines, is more ideological. He is for many years he's been a real hardliner on the idea that only like
you should consolidate with drug companies exclusive rights over inventions that can treat HIV, that can treat all sorts of diseases, including COVID. And when the but he's also played a big role in vaccines for infectious diseases. And so when the COVID pandemic hit, people sort of licked the Gates. He was one of the richest people in the world. He was famous. He had access to heads of state. He was either the biggest or the second biggest funder of the World Health Organization. He was giving money to universities, to journalists. He had a huge team of consultants and staff working for him on these areas. And so just because he had so much expertise, people were deferring to him on a lot of decisions. And unfortunately, that there was a moment last spring when it looked like they might open source a lot of the vaccine technology, because the money was for the vaccine technology at that time was all coming from governments. It was coming primarily from the U.S. government, but also governments in Europe and other countries that were throwing money in big chunks. I mean, like $100 million grant was a small grant during that period from the U.S. government. They were giving out, in some cases, well over $1 billion to a company, some $2.5 billion to some companies. So it was massive public money going into the development of vaccines. And there was a really important moment when the Financial Times and all kinds of other people were asking that everything be shared around the world on any new vaccines. Gates intervened. He intervened with Oxford University and their vaccine. He intervened with different people. He deployed the people he worked with to lobby against anything that would loosen up the control of the patents at that point. So what you had is vaccine technology, the United States, by Germany, by the European Commission, etc., privatized with private companies. And then, despite the massive impact of the pandemic, you had an unwillingness to share the technology when the companies could not meet demand. I'll stop there. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, please don't stop, because I think we're trying to figure out what is going on, because you have the Western countries, the wealthy countries. I mean, at one point, Canada had 2 doses per person. I mean, they were flooded with vaccines. And yet you see the poor countries, the developing countries, from which the wealth derives much of our wealth. Our raw materials, our diamonds, our oil, all that comes from these so-called poor countries. And we won't share in a pandemic? That is...
Well, I think
help me.
It's shocking and it's inexcusable, because it's the consequences of this pandemic affect everyone on the planet. They affect people. They're at risk medically, but they also are affected economically. There's mental health problems associated. There's kids taken out of school, businesses are collapsing, people losing their homes. There's all sorts of things happening around the world. You have emergency rooms in some countries like Brazil and India just jammed, or mass burials in some countries. So it's been this massive thing, and so it seems. And we have effective vaccines. So it seems that everything that can be done to bring as many manufacturers online as possible seems like the completely obvious thing to do. But that has not happened. There has been pressure that's forced the companies to do some outsourcing of vaccine technologies, and that has demonstrated that it's feasible. That has illustrated that you can bring in companies that have not even made a vaccine before. And those companies are currently making vaccines for the handful of companies that hold the rights right now. But it's not enough, because there's other companies, including big companies like Teva, or some of the bigger Indian manufacturers, that have tried to get into this space that have been turned down. Johnson & Johnson, for example, turned down a company in Canada that wanted to manufacture the vaccine, and there's a dispute going on right there, if you just want an example that's closer to home.
Upon what basis are they turning people down? I mean, how in a global pandemic that has shut the world down, how do you tell people, no, I'm not going to give you this recipe. I'm not going to share this with you. I'm not going to share this intellectual property with you. How? What is the basis upon which they say this?
Well, there's different levels. There's 2 companies that have indicated some willingness to share the rights and the patents, but they like Moderna, for example, said it would not enforce its patents during the pandemic. They said that quite early. But then they were asked, would you share the know-how how to make your new messenger RNA vaccine, the one that was developed with 100% cost sharing from the U.S. government? And what Moderna said was they said that it's what they think of it as a platform technology. It's a new manufacturing technology. So they say they didn't want to share the know-how because they thought if companies could manufacture this vaccine, they could manufacture Moderna's next product. And Pfizer has a non-disclosure agreement with BioNTech because Pfizer didn't invent its vaccine. They licensed it from BioNTech, a company that has its roots in Germany. And BioNTech was asked by the World Health Organization, would you share the manufacturing know-how with the World Health Organization and with other manufacturers? And they said they could not talk to the World Health Organization because they had a non-disclosure agreement with Pfizer. So I think that some companies, and it's been a problem trying to get Johnson to give access to its working cell line for its vaccine. So in these cases, the companies perceive it to be a commercial advantage to them to restrict access to the key things. In the case of Johnson & Johnson, it's everything. They won't license the patents. They won't give access to the working cell line. They won't give know-how. Won't give anything. And they think that at this point there's a lot of money to be made. In the beginning of the pandemic, some companies were saying, "Well, we're going to do it on a nonprofit basis," but it turned out to be anything but nonprofit. The numbers that people are talking about are both Moderna and Pfizer are talking about somewhere between $10 and $20 billion in sales this calendar year. And now you have companies saying that they're thinking about raising their prices. In some cases, like order of magnitude raises, really sharp hikes as the pandemic goes on. And then, you hear like, oh, you need 2 doses. And then it's like, oh, now you need a third dose, or maybe you need an annual dose. And since the market is the entire planet, it's the biggest vaccine market anyone ever imagined. There's a lot of money on the table right now. So you have the investors really coming first for the company. And of course, they don't want to share. And it has to be governments that's going to force them to share.
Aaron from Minnesota. Aaron, what's on your mind today?
Hi, good morning. How are you today?
Great hearing your voice.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on your show. I heard you talking about how I actually was unaware until watching your show this morning that the vaccine was privately funded. I didn't even know that. And when I heard that, I felt very compelled to call in because
publicly.
Sorry. I said that wrong. That's what I meant. Yeah. Publicly funded. Excuse me. Thank you.
Well, no, Aaron, hold on. Before you go into that, how did you think they were funded?
Honestly, I knew Dolly Parton donated $1 million. I thought, I just thought the companies were paying for it, I don't know. I'm not in that business. I just assumed, I suppose. So I was unaware. So what I was going to say is now knowing this, I'm actually a little bit even more upset because on December 9th of 2019, I was living in Los Angeles. I'm from South Minneapolis. That's where I currently reside. But I was living in Los Angeles, and I went to Disney World, Florida for my stepmom's 60th. My first trip there, came back to LA, and one day later, I woke up in the middle of the night. Both of my hands were numb, and my right foot was numb. I was very dizzy. I somehow walked zigzagged about a half mile to the emergency room, where I later lost consciousness. There's a lot of details about that, but long story short, I woke up paralyzed from the neck down. They didn't know what it was for 3 days. They said it was a stroke caused by a blood clot, but they didn't understand why a 37-year-old had this. Long story short, the next 3 months I was called the Enigma. A lot of other stuff happened. I moved back to Minneapolis, and that nursing home got hit by COVID. Actually, it's the hardest hit nursing home in California by COVID 3 weeks after I left. So a lot of craziness there. Now, you can imagine moving to Minneapolis, the pandemic's formally breaking out, me not even knowing that now that's the main suspect is an early American case of COVID, December 9th, 2019. But I have and everything that happened in South Minneapolis, and I'm a very strong supporter and part of that. But it's been very tough, and with the with the vaccine rollout, as a disabled person, I have since regained some momentum, but I'm still very heavily disabled, and I was not able to access the vaccine for quite some time. I actually only got my second shot about 2 weeks ago, and that was only because I know people in the community, because I'm from here, that I was able to get linked to somebody at the Minneapolis Department of Health to get a batch that was expiring. So it wasn't even like formally for disabled people. I was blocked from it.
Hold on. How long did you have to wait? How long did you have to wait between your first and second dose?
So, the first and second dose, they were both the 2 weeks apart because, like, since one is expiring, the second leg is expiring. Now, getting the first dose, though, that was, I only got that, like, 3 weeks ago. But the thing is, I am so high at risk. I have an autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis, which mimics cancer.
Yes.
Yes. And so I've got that in my lymph nodes, and, that's probably what we're now, the main suspect now in my situation is COVID. And it's official, it's formal. And so, the fact that I was already torn up by it as a 37-year-old who lost all ability from the neck down literally overnight one night. They blocked me. Several of my other disabled friends, if we're under 75, under 65, they say that the vaccine is available for people with high risk, but they don't. I mean, to be honest, within the disabled community here within Minneapolis, I'm going to say a very harsh, strong, scary word, but, we thought it was, similar to like how, in World War II that they were killing disabled people,
Hold on. Dr. Deborah Verholden, you're hearing Aaron's story. What do you say? I mean, and Aaron, when you see the people all over the world, most of the world, they don't even have access to these vaccines. How does that make you feel?
Right. Honestly, well, you can't only imagine. How does it make any of us feel? We're all people, so we all want the vaccine. Well, okay, there's controversy about the vaccine, but I'm saying generally speaking, we all want to survive. So, hearing that, I'm, especially now that I'm
hearing that these companies have not wanted to share, and these are recipes that you paid for. How does that make you feel?
That's what I'm saying. It makes me feel very upset because I'm familiar with my own situation, and I want other people. I don't want anyone to feel like I did. I mean, especially, I grew up lower middle class, low income. I'm currently, very not well off. So I know what it's like to be sort of shafted repeatedly, being, poor basically. And then thinking about other countries, that when I found out that I paid for this and I wasn't even able to have access to something that we in the disabled community have felt is a level of eugenics, that they don't want us to reproduce, they don't want us to survive, so that they blocked us as long as they could until, and supposedly there's so many doses available. So to imagine that this is happening all over the world now, that they're blocking them, that they're withholding that, and knowing how I felt. I mean, and then what does this tell you about how they feel about people in poor countries? I mean, we already know from war, anything.
Aaron, hold on, because I want.
Sorry, yeah.
No. Stay right there, because I'm glad to.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm glad to know that you're doing better. But
thank you.
No. I mean, I'm glad that he shared this story. Before we get back to you, Mr. Love, what are you hearing, Deborah Verholden? Because Deborah, you left Johns Hopkins to go to Flint because you wanted to help the people of Flint out. I mean, now you see what's happening to him up in Minneapolis. What we have happening within the United States.
We've got major problems, major inequities, and how people are getting treated with respect to getting this vaccine. what resources are available to them to support them, and all of that. So none of this is surprising to me. Again, it's just very telling about how our nation operates and how we operate inside of a global landscape. It's tragic, but this is not new. You know, I'm currently working with the ACLU with prisoners. Do you know prisoners go to prison and have to rehab cold turkey? You come to prison and you are an everyday heroin user or everyday opiate user, you are instantly going into withdrawal, and you are rehabbing cold turkey, and they want to vaccinate these folks within the first 8 to 14 days of them arriving. Can you imagine getting vaccinated and dealing with fever, chills, and arm pain and whatever on top of detoxing from heroin? I mean, there's just so many things wrong with our system and how it works and who it works for. And, you know, in my fight for equity, I've talked a lot about this. And you can hear it in any of my public talks. I talk about two other communities besides the racial inequity, and that is people with disabilities and chronic health conditions. And I put them together because I think it elevates the cause. And not everybody that has a disability has per se a chronic health condition, but I put them together because it elevates the cause. People with disability and people with chronic health conditions and people who live in rural communities. And the data are telling us that they're having a much harder time. And there's much less information and literacy around COVID and around COVID resources and other things available to this population, which jives with what the state of affairs was before COVID. So again, COVID isn't the problem. COVID is allowing us and making it inescapable for us to see and confront these problems.
James Love, I mean, we have a friend who's a brilliant pastor. She said, COVID is the snitch. It's really uncovered our issues, the inequities in the system. And it's also, we see how much private wealth controls public health, I guess, just to put it that way. Is that a fair description?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we've set up a system where there's an excessive amount of deference to commercial interest and investors in biotech, and there's a lot of money that's on the table. If you take a company like Novavax, their shares were trading around $4 at the beginning of the pandemic, then they shot up to, at one point, well over $200 a share. I mean, it was like a 50-fold increase in the share price of the company. And there's, I mean, not every company had the same experience, but there was a lot of wealth that was created around the pandemic from and their entire program was funded by the U.S. government in terms of the development of their vaccine. So I think that when you have these health problems, the first concern should be, what does it take to actually get the science to move ahead? And then once you have positive results, how do you get the products to people that need them? And we did a pretty good job on the first part. We threw a lot of money at the problem. The innovation story was pretty good. But the second part about how do you get the products to people has been really appalling, particularly, as you pointed out, internationally, where and one point, and I apologize if I have to leave soon, but I just want to make sure I make this one point, which is that it's always going to be unequal as far as how products are distributed when there's a shortage. Even if anyone even if a state was doing it, if there's not enough to go around, some people are going to get the vaccine, some people won't, at least for a period of time. That's inevitable. But what you have when wealth and power are involved, then you have not only inequality, but you have unfairness, and that's something you want to avoid. But that's for the products. Now, the know-how, the recipe, the way, the knowledge as to how you manufacture the vaccines, that does not have to be unequal. That is not rivaling consumption. You can actually share the vaccine without diminishing your own supply. In fact, everyone's better off that's trying to get access to a vaccine if you open up knowledge about how to manufacture it and you bring more manufacturers. The one concern that people have thrown out against the generics is they sort of say, well, we're not sure about the quality of a generic vaccine manufacturer. But those are issues that are addressed by regulators, shouldn't be by patent holders. So the decision about whether or not you can sell a vaccine is determined by the FDA in the United States. It's determined by the drug regulators in Canada and other countries, or by the World Health Organization for countries that depend upon the World Health Organization. So the quality regulation is something the government regulators should decide, or the World Health Organization, not the patent owners. And what happens when you leave it up to patent owners is they just don't want people to manufacture in competition with them. They don't want price competition. They don't want to lose a market that they might otherwise have. So, I apologize if I...
No, you've given us a lot today, and I can't wait for you to come back to the show, James Love. I thank you for the work that you're doing at the Knowledge Ecology International. I know you had to leave us today because a lot of people want to talk with you, but I thank you for helping us to get a better understanding of what we're looking at. And, and Aaron, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. Aaron, you still there?
All right. Yeah, I'm here. I'm right here.
Stay right there. I want to talk with you a little bit during the break. But James Love,
excellent.
Knowledge Ecology International, thank you so much for helping us to get a better understanding of what we're looking at. Everybody, it should not cost us. We should not have a hierarchy on life. This is just not right, really. And, we're going to make a little bit of a transition here. Well, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about the lifting of the moratorium on evictions. A lot of people are going to get thrown out of their homes. But first, we're going to talk about what's ailing us. COVID is not the number one killer in the United States. It's not. There's some things that we need to be doing to take care of our health. Everybody, millennials,
1 minute.
Born between 1981 and 1988, 44% of them at least have comorbidities. So how will that impact how we live? How will that impact COVID-19? Lots to think about. Lots to think about on the Santita Jackson Show. Stay right here. Call us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. You can text us at that number. Thank you, GWC Lawyers.
30.
And I want you to meet my morning stars here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page and on WCPT 820. And please like and subscribe on my Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Back with more for Santita Jackson.
15.
Just a few minutes. Aaron, are you doing well now?
Hi. Sorry. Hello.
Yes. I want to know how you are doing right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. I've regained a lot of mobility. I can move around my apartment. I also, I'm using a walker. I'm trying to use a cane. I can move about a half a block on a cane. But I just did a photo shoot, for this like a political activist group that I'm founding to mobilize our music scene here in Minneapolis. Oh. So I was able to climb a bridge, but trust me, that's just me being crazy. That's not I'm in bed for the next 4 days because I did that. You know what I mean?
Okay. So are you married? Do you have a partner? Are you able to take care of yourself, get food?
I appreciate your concern. Thank you for asking me. I mean, just generally, thank you for caring. Yeah, it's wild because when this first happened, I couldn't lift. My left leg was the only thing I could move. I could lift it off the bed about 1 inch, and they told me that I might never walk again. So, I moved.
We have Dr. Knighton.
At the end of February. And then, of course, I grew up a few blocks from where George Floyd was killed. I used to go to that store all the time. And so I sat through all of this, and it's just sitting here alone. I'm alone. I got a new kitten, Arthur. He's great. But, I saved him from the winter, but he's a street cat. It's kind of like me at times. But anyways, I can move around a little. I can move around my apartment and stuff like that. And it's just, every day working hard to get better,
Well, you know what? I'll say this before you go. Reach out to some people. You'd be surprised. There's some help out here. God does not leave any of us hanging. I'm a religious woman. whatever your religious commitment is or is not. I hear you, but just make sure you get involved in the community. Because people, you're going to find some people who care about you, who are going to look in on you, who want to make sure that not only that you survive, but that you thrive. So just continue to reach out, okay? Because you're never alone. You're never more than a phone call away from someone who's willing to help you, okay?
That's very encouraging advice. I'm very flattered hearing it from you. I'm a big fan of your father, of course, and I actually saw him and the Reverend Al Sharpton and Ben Crump actually while they were in Minneapolis. I don't want to disclose where, just because I kind of whatever, but I just feel very honored even to speak to you, and I am very connected in my community here in South Minneapolis. Like I said, I'm organizing a political group. I don't want to keep too much of your time, but I just want you to know that that's very heartfelt. Thank you. I appreciate those words.
Aaron, I just hope that you keep in touch, okay?
All right.
Keep in touch. I
Thank
want
you.
to know how you're doing.
I will. I'll send you a little message. How about that?
Now, that'll make me feel better. I like that. Okay?
All right.
All
All right. I
right.
appreciate it.
You keep on fighting, Aaron.
I will. Believe me.
Sending you much love.
Sending you much love. Thank you very much today.
Of course.
All right.
Wow, everybody. That's a lot. That's a lot. You know what? How you doing, Dr. Knighton?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good. I just had to listen. He's one of our listeners from Minneapolis, and he was sharing his story. And I just felt that it was important that we hear his story, and that he needed to know that he was also heard. I think that everybody, pay attention to folks, and let's really start loving each other, because we need that. People need to know. My father often says that people care that you know, but people need to know that you care. It's very important. It's very important. Something moved him to call this morning. And if somebody is in Minneapolis, just look in on him. Just look in on him today. Just look in on him. It's important. It really is, that people begin to care about each other and let people know that you care. It's very important. So let me get myself together before I come back on the air. But it's important. Everybody, it's very important. Very important. But that's a triumphant story, because he called in, and I'm so glad about that. I'm so glad about that. Oh boy. So excuse me, everybody. Okay, so we're going to talk about our health. How about that? Well, I'm sitting up here crying. I hope my eyelashes don't come off, ladies. My glue can't take it. I need my glue. Oh my God.
1 minute.
Well, thank you all for being here today. That you all
you're welcome.
Send Aaron some love, and you all, somebody, just check in it. Just see how he's doing. It's important. Let him know that you care. Let him know that you care. Let him know that you care. It's so important. So, okay, ladies, I think I've recovered myself now. Thank you very much.
Well, I was about to say, we had those moments sometimes, trust me.
It's a lot. I've been so blessed in my life to have people who love me and care for me. And
30.
we're never but a person away from someone who can love you and care for you. God sends someone to you all the time. God does not leave anybody hanging. but you need to reach out too.
Mhm.
And we need to reach out and know that
15.
we really do. So stand by, everybody.
10.
That's right, Stanley. What the world
5.
needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing there's just too little of. That's right.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio. Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota, sending Aaron much love today. Mwah. Sending you much, much, much love. I want you to call me or text me at 773 763 WCPT, 773 763 9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. We want to hear from you today. We're talking about our health. We've been talking about COVID-19 and this, and sharing the vaccines, sharing the recipes with the world so that the world can get well, so that we can all get well together. That's important. But now we're going to be talking about millennials, those particularly the millennials born between 1981 and 1988. 44% of them at least have chronic conditions. What does that say about our health, their health? How will that impact the pandemic? And on and on and on. It's something to think about. And then at the bottom of the hour with Dr. Max Wolf, we're going to be talking about the lifting of the moratorium on evictions. What does that mean? People are going to be kicked out of their apartments and homes. And children, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, people are behind in their rent. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. We have not seen times this bad really since the Great Depression. What is going on? What is going on? It was a Trump appointed judge who issued that decision. So, is there anything we can do about it? States are making the case for that, to keep some people in their homes. It's on a state by state basis, but on a federal level. We got to talk about that, everybody. So I want you to call me or text me at 773 763 WCPT, 773 763 9278. How is your health, by the way? Think about that, everybody. Let's go to some of these headlines as we go on to the rest of the show. Chicago will have a high of 50 degrees, rain. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 61 degrees. Partly cloudy. The NASDAQ closed down 51 points. Yesterday, the Dow closed up 97 points. And the S&P 500 closed up almost 3 points, 2.9 points, everybody. Major League Baseball. Well, the Twins were bested by the Rangers 3-1, and they might be able to avenge themselves today as they face off with the Rangers once again today. The Cubs were triumphant over the Dodgers 6-5, and the Cubs will be playing the Pirates today. The White Sox were shut out, however, by Cincinnati. Everybody. So, everybody, let's talk about this. What are some of these headlines? So much is going on. Members of the World Trade Organization have discussed a proposal to waive intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines and treatments, a step many world leaders say is the best way to boost our health all around the world with this airborne disease. Rich nations have bought up a whole lot of the global vaccine supply. At one point, Canada had 2 doses per person. Wow. They were oversupplied, leading to declining case numbers and a slow return to normalcy as more and more people get vaccinated, as more and more people are careful. Now, America is already vaccinated fully, 32% of the population. And experts say the authorization of the Pfizer vaccine for young teens will drive up those numbers even higher, everybody. Facebook's independent court-like oversight board decided that the social network can continue to block former President Trump from its platform. The board concluded that his post on January 6th, which praised the Capitol rioters, severely violated, as they said, Facebook's policies and created an environment where a serious risk of violence was possible. Facebook will revisit this decision in 3 months. The Paycheck Protection Program, a core element of the government's economic relief agenda, is officially exhausted over weeks before its planned closure at the end of this month. The program reopened in January with an additional $284 billion for first-time borrowers and some second loans for those who participated in last year's first round. The Small Business Administration said that more than 8 million small businesses were helped by the program. The SBA will keep taking some new applications from underserved areas. Wow, everybody. In the meantime, President Biden is promoting the new Restaurant Revitalization Fund. It's a $28.6 billion program established as part of his massive relief package, COVID-19 relief package, everybody. Well, Dr. Fauci said that he was agnostic about sharing these COVID vaccine recipes. Well, guess what? The CDC, as they're expecting a surge in U.S. cases through May due to variants before vaccines take a sharp dive, they say, later on in the year. Well, something transformative and hopeful happened yesterday. Under pressure, President Biden backed a COVID-19 vaccine patent waiver. It seems that more poor countries all around the world will get access to this recipe. People are hailing this as a monumental moment. What do you think about it? Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. So let's get right to it. One of the world's top epidemiologist is with us every day, Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. And, of course, one of our new favorites, but we're so honored to have her because she, of course, is one of the rare persons in her field. She is an infection prevention specialist. There are only a few thousand in the United States, in the world, actually. Dr. Shanina Knighton. She's a nurse, and she is a PhD, and she is working to help us to stay well. I was struck by this story, ladies. 44% of older millennials born between 1988 and 1981 have chronic health conditions. Chronic health conditions. And this is in light of the fact that COVID-19 was the third leading killer, only the third leading killer in the United States for 2020. The number one killer, heart disease, cancer, and just behind COVID, I mean, you've got strokes, you've got chronic regulatory diseases. I mean, just on and on and on. I mean, we are really struggling. But I'm really surprised when I hear about these numbers with the older millennials. Welcome to the show, Dr. Knighton, and of course, thank you for staying with us, Dr. Deborah Verholden. Dr. Knighton, are you surprised by this information that so many millennials, like more than 40%, have chronic health conditions?
I am not. And I know that sounds unfortunate. It's interesting. I am a millennial. And so.
And I am not.
Yeah. But one of the things that I can tell you for sure, so early on, it's interesting because being raised in Cleveland, I was actually an obese kid, and I lived in neighborhoods where someone would describe it as being a food desert. So we had the corner stores, and oftentimes, there were the packaged snacks. And I'm trying to do this without being any specific on to any names. But you had all of this stuff up here. And when I tell you, when it came time for me to go to college, I had high cholesterol by the time I made it to college.
Whoa.
And I'm like, this is not normal.
Wait a minute, what?
I had high cholesterol by the time I made it to college. And I'm talking about, of course, my mom and them didn't know any better. We were eating the Spam and, Vienna sausages out the can, all of that. So, of course, they didn't know any better. But as I got older and started taking my own health into account, being more responsible and just thinking through what it was that I was eating, I had tried, saying, okay, well, I need to cut back on sugar, cut back on this, just to find that processed foods was just as much as the problem. And so when you're looking at foods that are linked to cancerous tumor growth, and I'm not talking about the food itself, I'm talking about the ingredients in the food, such as the BHAs and the BHTs. When you're looking at the fact that there's propylene glycol, which is antifreeze. Many people don't know, but antifreeze is found in ice cream. Kids, they like the hot snacks.
the hot snacks is packed with a lot of bad stuff, that can cause asthma, that can cause eczema. So when we're looking at these things, even such as foods that are intended to stop, like there are processed meats that contain sodium nitrate that's meant to stop bacterial growth. Well, if it's stopping bacterial growth, that's not just a bad bacteria, it's stopping a good bacteria too, which means that your body can't fight things off like it needs to. And so those are just a few examples, but I attribute a lot of the issues that we have to what it is that we're consuming. And so it does not surprise me, because it surprises me even more that some of these things are approved in our country and not in other countries.
Wow. Dr. Deborah Verholden, we're not in the best of shape. I mean, if 44%, according to this study, if 44% of millennials born in the 80s, between 81 and 88, just in that decade, if they have these chronic health conditions, what does this portend for their futures?
Well, what does it put forward for our future is the real question. Because when you think about average life expectancy, that's based in large part on the cohort, on the birth cohort. So we talk about average life expectancy in the U.S. If average life expectancy goes up in the U.S. by a year or two, that doesn't mean anything for somebody who was born in 1940. Life expectancy is based on your birth cohort. So this is sort of like a foreshadowing. So if this generation is living sicker, what's predictable is we'll find out in 20, 30 years that they also likely will have died younger. So there's going to be a cohort effect. And that cohort effect, this article specifically focused on millennials, but this phenomenon is getting pushed back to all the generations that have come after them as well. I think as a country, we have gyms and all of these sort of innovations, but the very basics of health, we don't practice. And people want things to be less regulated, et cetera. But as Dr. Knight said, we have products and we have chemicals that are in our food products that are illegal to put in food products in other countries. As a public health person, we always try to focus on context. We try to create a context where healthy choices are the natural choices. So we've done things like, limit the size of sugary drinks. Why does somebody need a 40-ounce or a 30-ounce or even a 24-ounce soda? Nobody should consume that much sugar at one time. So there are just so many basic public health strategies that we could be implementing that would alter the landscape and make healthy eating more of a default instead of something that you have to have a lot of knowledge, information, money, or resources for. If you think about it, people just moving their arms and legs is one of the best things that people can do for their immune systems and their overall health. What does that mean when you live in a community where there are no sidewalks? I grew up in a neighborhood where we had sidewalks and we had, it was all residential. It was like little duplex homes. So my house was attached to the one next to it and there was a yard around it. But I grew up riding my bike. When I was a little one, it was riding my trike on the sidewalk. And as I got older, I would ride my bike on the street. But there was like a neighborhood context where, cars didn't run kids over on bikes. And we didn't ride our bikes down the middle of the road either. We just have so much about the context of American society that is not conducive nor health promoting. But an easy place to start would be regulating what is and is not allowed in our food. That would be a great start. Another thing is ensuring that everybody has access to healthy food. Because what happens is your palate starts to get accustomed to the food that you eat the most. So some of the spicy food, when she called it the hot snacks, I know exactly what you're talking about. But, the hot snacks and all the sugary beverages. And, I did work in Baltimore. And what we figured out is that kids, your average Baltimore City school child live within a quarter mile, which is what we consider walking distance, to 5 liquor stores, but 0.4 of a grocery store. So what does 0.4 of a grocery store mean? That means a significant proportion of kids do not live within walking distance to a grocery store. But on average, each kid has 5 liquor stores within walking distance. So what would the kids do? They'd stop in the liquor store on their way to school and get their morning nutrition out of the liquor store, which is offering chips and soda and now, candy and things like that. So we need to deal with the context in which health decisions and health choices are made. I think that's going to be, from a public health perspective, a big part of this process. And then we do need better information and better literacy around diet, physical activity. And I don't mean diet like going on a fad diet. When I say diet, I mean everything that you put in your mouth. I was on my webinar and I was really pushing for people eating nutrient-dense food. The first question that somebody asked me is, what is a nutrient-dense food?
Which was, I was about to ask you.
So
what is that?
I started, these are foods that are high in vitamins and minerals and nutrients and tend to be much lower in fat and oftentimes calories. And when they do have fat, they have the kind of healthy fat that your body needs, like the kind of fat that you'll find in avocados or in, like the omega-3 fatty acids and some of these other things. But we just don't have that. And so if I think about, well, from a public health perspective, where do we start that? I think a good place that we can start is in all formal systems instruction. Kids should be learning about this stuff in school. And when I was a kid, they talked about the food pyramid, right? And then we had a pyramid, and at some point we had a wheel and other things. Kids need to understand what it is to nourish your body for performance.
Sure.
And they just simply don't know that. I even watch athletes who, only because of their youth, are they able to perform with the low nutrient diet. A lot of the things that you get, and I always tell people, if you have a doubt, the most nutrient-dense foods typically come without a label.
Well,
they don't have a label.
Hold on, because see, this is what I want to ask Dr. Knighton about, both of you. Dr. Knighton, we bundle up. I'm not trying to put any fast food restaurants on blast, but you can get a meal bundled up for, say, $5.99, $7.99. But you cannot go to a grocery store and get fruit and vegetables bundled up for the same amount. You might pay, what, $10, $20 for a watermelon. How can we change that around?
So for one thing we can't change is, I would say, is the economics, that exist around the availability. When we're talking about supply and demand, when we're talking about the ethics of a lot of these fast food restaurants being in the neighborhoods, of poverty, which does, limit someone's choices. So it is very challenging when you can't get fruits and vegetables bundled. But the other piece of it that many don't talk about is the fact that these foods that people consume, because it's one thing about education, but it's another thing about habit. And so in a way that our palates have been set up, unfortunately, is that people don't crave the healthy foods. Don't crave the healthy food. So if you have somebody that wants McDonald's, somebody that wants any kind of, like, let's say French fries, or like, let's say they want a burger, that may tend to be attractive over you saying to someone, you know what, let's go ahead and eat these green beans, and here's why. And what I express to people is that for a lot of us, what we don't realize is, even for the individuals as they have described that are like, oh my gosh, I'm fit and I can eat, a diet that's not nutrient dense, and I'm still going to look good. But what I describe it as is, you might have a candy red paint Cadillac on the outside and be looking great, might be looking shiny, but your engine on the inside got 500,000 miles, which means that your outside appearance is not going to save your body on the inside. If you are putting bad things in it, it is somehow going to reflect on the outside. So when you're mentioning, like these millennials, like the older millennials that are showing up with these chronic conditions, I'm not surprised because when you think about the affordability of food, the habit of food, of being able to consume these things, on top of that, there's now like the vegan train. And just because you're vegan doesn't necessarily mean that you're safe. Like there are also studies showing that highly processed vegan foods are also attributable to cancer. And so when we're looking at the foods that we're consuming, it must start at you, like Dr. Deb said, and I actually did a study with a lower income group of children in Cleveland a few years back, where when they showed up to camp, because they were allowed to bring their own snacks, I started collecting their wrappers for their snacks. And I asked them to write down on a list what were their top 10 favorite snacks. And you can imagine what was on that list. Well, what we did is during camp, I had them look at the ingredients from the bottom of the list up to the top of the list in terms of what it was that they were eating. And we actually connected those things back to some of the conditions that they saw someone die from in their family, or the diseases that they were seeing in their family, or individuals that they were helping to manage their diseases. And to be able to say that these habits don't stop, they don't start when we're just older. They start when we're younger, and this is how they end up becoming a chronic disease. Hence, chronic is long term. And so when I broke that down, you would be surprised the number of parents that was coming back. I've been trying to stop my kids from eating this, and now finally they want to when it's on their own. Or I even had some that came back and fussed me out because it was like, well, what kind of snacks am I supposed to buy if they don't want to eat this anymore? So you would be surprised the power that kids have if we educate them properly.
You know
Sure.
what? I want to have you all, but I have 30 seconds. Deb, you got it.
We did a similar study, and we looked at what kids were eating and what they were throwing away. And we separated the garbage, and we found that a lot of the healthy foods were landing in the garbage. And honestly, with some simple education and retraining, we actually shifted that dynamic. So there are lots of possibilities. And I do acknowledge the same thing Dr. Knighton said, which is a lot of people are faced with tough choices because sometimes some of these quick grab, bad for you foods are cheaper and they're just easier to grab and throw in the kid's hand or throw in a bag. So there's multi-parts of this, and we can take it on.
Well, I mean,
30.
Look, what do they call it? I'm not going to mention any names, but whole paycheck. I mean, it costs to be healthy in the society. It costs more. And that needs to be flipped too. So we've been talking about vaccines today that the American taxpayer paid for. And no one wants to share with poor people. And now you can bundle up cheap food. But you will not bundle up food that comes out of the ground from God's own seed. Everybody, we're going to have to change this around. Dr. Shanina Knighton, one of the world's leading infection prevention specialists, brilliant nurse, and of course, our own Dr. Deb. That's right. Epidemiologist, world-renowned epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State. We're going to have Dr. Maxwell talking about the moratorium. Wow, on eviction ban. That's over now. People are going to get thrown out of their homes. Back in just a minute. Thank you, ladies.
No, absolutely.
Ooh, I mean, these people are 40 and 47 years of age. It's like 40, 43. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. 40, 33.
Yeah,
that is terrible.
I'm no younger than that. No, it is. It really is. But I continue to say this until the practice has got to get better. And I'm talking about even from the FDA. And many people don't think about it, but they think the Food and Drug Administration is intended to keep us safe, but it's really meant to just do that admin work. So register the foods, register the ingredients, and make sure that people are doing the studies. And it's called, Everything Added to Food in the U.S. So you can go to ethis.gov, and that's the entity of the FDA site. So it's all of this stuff that's up there about the ingredients. But if me or you was to go and fight the ingredients as a scientist, Dr. Devin, be like, oh, well, you know what? I know that this caused tumors in my patients.
We have Dr. Wolf.
Money comes when you are going against a company that has a lot of resources and you sitting up here trying to use your pennies to fight litigation. So as long as they are not proven guilty, they are innocent, and those foods will continue to stay on the market. Think about it. Triclosan, they've been fighting triclosan since the 1970s, and it took up until maybe about 4 or 5 years ago for it to get banned. So do you realize how much neurological damage had been done up until that time?
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, let us not forget our political parties serve the interests of big business.
Period.
I think the most shining example of this was the fight against big tobacco. The fight against big tobacco. They used to be able to promote tobacco products as health promoting. It took 2 decades to get a simple warning placed on tobacco products that they could potentially cause cancer and were not good for pregnant women. That took 2 decades. So let us not forget, and this is why this progressive movement is so important, because this unfortunate bipartisan system, ultimately at the end of the day, both parties, in my opinion, are serving the interests of big business. Some just try to do it in a more socially justice-informed way, but we need to serve the interests of people. Because my thing is this, there's still opportunities for a free economy and an economy where there's a fair marketplace and good products will, succeed and all of those other things. But where are the basic protections in place? Like, I'm a public health person. This is what public health is all about.
Absolutely.
So we need better laws and enforcement of those laws. Absolutely. And we need to not kowtow to big business.
Well, you know what, ladies? That's going to have to be the last word there. I've got Dr. Max Wolf here.
1 minute.
I knew you all would get wound up. We're going to talk about them putting people out on the streets, which is what they're preparing to do. As old folks who say, this is what they're finna do.
Well, I'm gonna if you got a line free, I'm like a moth to a flame. I'm gonna go on mute because I just want to listen.
Okay, of course you can listen.
Because this
30.
hit very close to home in Michigan, because our governor had a stay of eviction.
Stay right
and
there.
It got lifted. And I like
Likewise,
because this is a complex issue.
Put them on hold.
It is.
Dr.
15.
Wolf is here, and I'll let you, and you all will meet Dr. Wolf. We'll bring you all in on the conversation.
10.
He was eager to talk about this today, and he's a brilliant person.
5.
How you doing, Max?
Thanks for having me, and look forward to learning from the guests and the audience as always.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. What a blessing it has been to be with all of you today here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and, of course, on Facebook, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and, of course, on my YouTube channel, Santita Jackson Show channel. Please continue to like and subscribe, and meet me over on LinkedIn, and meet me over on Twitter, and on and on and on. It's a lot to keep up with, but we've got something to talk about. I think we've been looking at a lot of inequities. What did Reverend Tisha Dixon Williams said, that COVID has been the snitch. It has uncovered everything so much, and the fragility of our existence, economically, socially, politically. So much has been revealed at this time. And so it's very interesting, as we are in the midst of this pandemic, as people still have no money. A federal judge struck down the national eviction moratorium, which enabled people to stay in their homes. Not Reverend. Dr. Wolf, help me with this.
So it's a cause for some concern, because as best we know, about 1 in 5 U.S. households has a limited or non-existent ability to pay its rent, right? And so what was challenged here was the idea that the Centers for Disease Control could tell people that they couldn't evict other folks, because if the basic, which is still the case, by the way, if the basic prophylactic measure, the basic thing we need to do is stay home and not be right up all on top of each other than packing people into substandard housing without ventilation or telling them to shelter in place while throwing them out of the shelter was deemed critical for national security to prevent that. And so we had the CDC invoke an unusual use of powers, actually under the Trump administration at the sort of height of the crisis. So to be fair, when they started admitting there was a crisis after the 4 months of lying severely worsened the crisis, we did that. And then a bunch of states, so I think one of your other guests mentioned it, it's worth noting that states, municipalities, and other legal jurisdictions have their own bans in place. They were not all lifted or rescinded. The ones that passed, for instance, in my home state here, New York, is still in place to September. And that won't much change other than you wouldn't have federal protection on top of it, right? But for lots of states, including a lot of the sort of southern states, some of whose associations of realtors were the plaintiffs in this case, you could see an immediate loss of protection because they did not pass and probably will not pass state-based versions of the eviction ban. It does seem like a particularly nasty Mother's Day gift to a lot of people. So happy Mother's Day, essential workers, and enjoy a extended outdoor vacation of the involuntary variety. So the timing was bad, but that probably just has to do with the court docket. But in any case, it's quite troubling given we think there's about 1.7 million households in an eviction pipeline saved for the moratorium.
What would this look like? I mean, because some states, have they have these moratoria still in place. Many do not.
Yeah.
We're in a pandemic, an airborne virus. What could this look like?
Well, also, we're in another pandemic, right? I realize we're overusing the phrase, but look, we're in another kind of pandemic of disinvestment in affordable housing. And we do also have a homelessness problem that's pretty serious. And we have a homelessness problem that's pretty acute, actually, also among the working poor, including a fair number of mothers with young children, right? So these things have not gone away because of COVID. In fact, a lot of the underlying stressors economically that coincide with increased homelessness or housing insecurity have actually worsened pretty meaningfully. So look, a lot of these things, I think the eviction moratorium was an emergency stopgap because we don't have a proper social safety net, right? And so we know that without a little bit of sort of enforced mercy, we probably won't have much to offer people who get themselves into a difficult situation. And then the other thing I remember is the face of poverty in America, not the imaginary face of poverty, often driven by various social biases and bigotry, but the actual face of poverty is working single moms and their children. That is who's poor in America. And we know that moms and single moms have suffered disproportionately in this crisis because they've been asked to provide childcare alone with no resources while also working at jobs that were disproportionately shut down because they engage in a lot of point of service jobs. So think about waitresses and retail employees and brick and mortar and all kinds of people who provide caring services, teachers, daycare workers, hospital orderlies, who either took enormous disease risk and or were in facilities that were disproportionately likely to be shut down and also faced a crisis of being asked to work and pay for childcare that didn't exist. And so they often left the labor force, and we've seen a huge exodus from the labor force of these women, which means that they're unemployed for no fault of their own, and now they're sort of potentially, in many states, losing some protection from being evicted when we know they can't pay the rent, right? So I guess we'll wait a few months and then see the tragedies and hear these terrible stories and pretend we're surprised, or we can try to deal with it now, and I think socially, individually, morally, massively better to deal with it faster. Again, I don't want to scare people too, though. If you have a state legislature, as in New York and some others, that's passed its own moratoriums, those were not lifted, right? This is the federal CDC-based moratorium that was lifted. So I don't want to cause people undue alarm in those cases when they shouldn't be alarmed, although there sadly are many cases where they should be alarmed.
Well, I mean, I think that we should be alarmed because I'm just wondering if there will be a bit of mission creep, if you will, now that on the federal level, they've said, because now we're opening up again, Dr. Wolf. And we're talking with Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist. Um, and just really, now we're opening up. We're now returning to normal. Chicago on the 4th of July, the president said on the 4th of July, we want to reopen the United States of America. So in a soft way, the emergency is over. Yes, the pandemic is here, but the pandemic, as Dr. Deborah Verholden, who's holding, it's endemic. It's going to be with us. And we've got a vaccine, so we've got to keep on going now. We've got to move forward. I'm wondering if these moratoria in various states will expire. While people still don't have jobs, while they're still way behind in their rent, just how can we get out of
I
this?
think it is also important right now just to pause and say we're not out of this pandemic. We are in better shape in the pandemic now than we were before, which is wonderful, and I'm for celebrating the game. But we have pretended we were done with it many times, always to cataclysmic surge results. And I believe we are now doing that again. Because as much as we like to pretend other people's problems are just theirs, they are not. And what is happening in places like India and Brazil is a crucible for the mutations that threaten to undermine whatever protections we have from our vaccine. And we still have a lot of people who aren't vaccinated, many who will not get vaccinated, and we will be living with it, hopefully a diminished version, although that's not clear, for years. Right? So I realize that's not the best news ever, but it's true. And so hopefully we're going into the easier portion of the pandemic, although that's unclear in the foreseeable future. But we are by no means done with it.
Everybody call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. What do you think about the overturning of this national eviction ban? Do you expect states to now jump in and institute bans on evicting people? Or do you think that this is really going to kind of just creep out and we're going to see hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people pushed out of their homes? If they're pushed out of their homes, Dr. Max Wolf, where do they go?
Well, I mean, they have a lot of company, right? Since we have a pretty massive homeless situation, especially in the higher cost rental cities, right? So I think we have sort of two kinds of homelessness. We have a kind of homelessness that's very, very widespread, including suburban and rural areas, that gets kind of swept under the radar. And then we have a very obvious urban homelessness problem. So the urban homelessness is associated, but not only with mental health challenges and substance abuse challenges. And those are the folks who are camping out on every street corner in our cities. I'm not sure are just down for the urban adventure. Feel like it's a lifestyle that not everyone chooses voluntarily, despite the fact that we don't always have a social conversation that suggests we understand that. And then we have the sort of epidemic of homelessness that doesn't get called that, which is the 30 and 40-year-old kids who are in their parents' garage and basement who can't make a living, no necessary fault of their own, and the friend and the crazy uncle who came for the weekend 11 years ago and still there, and the people living in foreclosed houses and the people kind of surfing around or living in a truck or a van or a tent, and again, not because it's Memorial Day weekend.
Let me go to Pete from New Lenox. Pete, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Santita, and thank you for taking this call.
Of course.
Your guest says an awful lot of obvious things, but I'll tell you what, if you focus on all the negative, you're only going to have a negative outcome. And let me tell you some other situations. It takes about 7 months to get through the eviction process from soup to nuts. The next thing is I own two homes that I'm currently renting out, okay? We've been going through this now, doctor, for over a year. We are not in a situation where people cannot find jobs. There is not enough workers for the jobs that are out there currently available. And it's not fast food. Okay, we happen to be in a situation on the other side of the pandemic where we have an abundance of opportunities. So what I don't hear you saying, doctor, is, oh, it's going to be bad. Millions of people on the street. We can't do this. In 7 months, okay, and that's the average that I'm dealing with right now, 7 months in a great job market, you're not mentioning any of this other stuff. You're just all doom and gloom And it's, hey, you know what? This could be a real bad situation. We got mothers with kids and pandemic and this and that. Well, when you talk like that, that's the analogy. That's the thread that you weave, because it's all negative. It's not negative for everything. Okay, so there are opportunities out there for people, and it doesn't take a month. It's an average of 7 months from today, and they've been getting benefits for over 14 months with this pandemic. So let's start talking about things that might be a little bit more positive and give this audience some truth instead of it's going to be really, really bad.
Pete, remember when people started applying for unemployment benefits for the first several months, they could not get through. People have not been getting benefits for 14 months. That's not true. But let me bring Dr. Wolf.
No, I'm not saying benefits.
No,
I think Pete.
I'm giving you what you just
Pete,
said. Let me have Dr. Wolf respond to you.
Pete, I understand that there's a positive, and if you can't evict as a landlord, it can put you in a difficult situation. But let's just be clear. I'm not factually wrong. I'm speaking to the 9 out of 10 people who are more likely to rent as the tenant than the landlord, right? So for them, the joys of eviction might look different. But I understand that especially the smaller landlords have been in a tough situation, and many of them are stuck with tenants, in some cases, by the way, who can actually pay and don't. And I do think more needs to be done in those cases, right? You don't want opportunistic non-payment of people who are just sort of, for lack of a better phrase, kind of using the pandemic. That is true. But for me, just so you know what I do and the perspective I come from, what I'm talking about is a negative in order to avoid it, right? So it's a little bit like when your doctor tells you maybe ease back on the deep fried stuff. He isn't being negative about food. He's telling you how to live a longer, happier life. Socially, we need a solution to eviction. And I think what you're bringing up, which is not a point I disagree with, right, is that there are a lot of landlords, particularly the smaller ones, who own a property or a few properties, and who may be living, in fact, and not terribly lavishly either, on those rents, who have found themselves in a situation where it is impossible or very difficult for them to collect either all or some of the rent, right? There are programs in place for the landlords as well, though, and they have received a lot of money too. And I wouldn't think we would get rid of the eviction moratorium without also getting rid of those moratoriums, right? But the truth is, just so we're clear, if your tenants can't pay their rent, you have a problem as a landlord too.
Yes. Can I make a comment real quick, Santita? Okay. Sir, let me explain this to you. I have 2 rental properties, and I can guarantee you I'm spending more times with my bank and my attorneys trying to keep myself afloat with these 2 pieces of property. And I've got 2 tenants in these 2 properties that have not been paying rent, and I'm spending more time talking to banks and lawyers than my tenants are trying to obtain jobs. I spend literally hundreds of hours over the last 7, 8, 9 months. That's when it started turning, when I couldn't make my payments, okay? Well, this moratorium on people like myself, I'm spending hundreds of hours trying to stay afloat, and my 2 landlords are coming in late, having people over. I'm asking, are you looking for jobs? Are you looking for work? Yeah, I'm looking, which is a bunch of crock, and you know it. I'm spending hundreds of hours trying to do the right thing. These people don't help themselves. They don't help themselves, and they want the government.
That's not true. That's not overwhelmingly true. But there are some people who
come on, Santita.
Pete. Now you know the rules of engagement here. Respect. Stay right there. What I'm saying to you is I think that your ire is focused in the wrong direction. I think that landlords need assistance too. They've been left out of this. They've been left out of the mix here. But the thing is, you are focusing. We have corporations that are still afloat. They got helped. You didn't get helped, and the American people didn't get helped. Everybody who didn't pay their rent. There are a lot of people who, number one, don't act like when we went into this crisis last year, that Americans were doing well. Half of Americans could not afford to go to an emergency room. So, I mean, there were already problems in the system that just became more dire when people lost their jobs, when the society itself shut down. So, as Pete, I've let you speak. I'm going to have to let you go, but I want you to keep listening, okay? I mean, and I really hope that you get some relief. I really do.
And I do appreciate your comments, and there are 2 sides to every story, and there's always a value to knowing both.
Absolutely, absolutely, Pete. Because I don't think that you should go into the poorhouse while you're trying to make an investment and better yourself. Not at all. I mean, I want you to be okay. Let me go to Jim. Jim, what's on your mind today?
Good morning. Economics 101 is guns and butter. Do you want to put it into guns or do you want to put it into social causes? We're determined to go to any length to annihilate each other. That goes for every country on earth. We can't wait to explode a bomb. Talk about pandemics. Could you imagine a world where we didn't spend all of our money on nuclear devices to annihilate each other and use it instead to make our life a little happier, make our life a little safer, and medicine should be for everybody. That should be just a universe. Anyway, you guys have a good morning. Thank you.
Blessings to you. Blessings to you. Dr. Wolf, let me bring on Dr. Knight and Dr. Verholden. They said, we know we finished with our segment, but we want to hear what you guys are going to talk about there. Stay right there, Dr. Wolf. Dr. Knighton, why don't you react to what you've been hearing, and Dr. Verholden as well. Give you about a minute apiece. Dr. Knighton, because you've had quite a journey in your own life, right?
I have, yes. And then, and oh my gosh, like I greatly. No, I was.
Okay, you were the first person in your family to come out of high school. So let's be clear, you've seen life from a lot of different angles.
Yes. And it's interesting. First and foremost, just the information that was presented about, where we are with the evictions, the fact that, yes, this pandemic did nothing but just expose the truth of everything that has already been existing. I wholeheartedly agree. And just even too, listening to the reaction of your listener, I understand that he is frustrated in this instance, and I can see it from two sides of the coin. And so my husband is an entrepreneur, and I can be honest in telling you that our unemployment payments were much higher than the wages that were allowed here, that it was hard for him to find people to work for him because people were able to draw unemployment. The other piece of it is that the gentleman is not thinking about is, just in our previous segment, we were talking about chronic conditions of millennials. We're also talking about the remote learning thing that's going on with kids. We're talking about the sandwich, households. We're talking about the lack of resources. We're talking about individuals that lost their jobs. And so while someone may think, oh, I'm just not looking, or I'm just telling you that I'm not looking, there are other underlying factors that maybe these individuals don't feel comfortable letting him know the reason they may or may not be seeking employment at this time. And I find that there are a lot of people that are just in a tough situation right now of deciding between whether or not they need to go out and find a job. There also being uncertainty, with their children, with their health. It's a lot going on right now. And the other aspect that many are not talking about is while our kids were shut in and learning at home, that also came with some mental health issues. And so, yes, while some are saying, yes, schools are open back up, our kids are back in school, many don't know how many children do not have the resources to receive mental health assistance or adults for mental health assistance that may not make them employable right now or ready to be back in school settings. And so there's a lot to unpack here. And having our main basic needs in life, such as food and shelter and security, of course, no one's thinking about paying rent if you have those things that are unmet and if you don't have the resources. So I greatly appreciate this conversation today.
No, thank you for that. Dr. Deborah Verholden, a couple of, really about a little more than a minute for you so we can get on out of here with Dr. Wolf.
Well, so the comments I would make, one, I acknowledge and appreciate the just truth-telling of your caller because he spoke his truth.
Yeah.
He's speaking from a perspective of a hardworking, average Joe citizen who's doing his best, and he has an experience of we've got this law or this, sort of policy that was enacted with this, act by the CDC, but it only dealt with one piece of the pie. unfortunately, we have capitalized on the plight of the poor. You know, the fact that housing insecurity remains such a big problem in this country that has some of the greatest, the world's greatest degree of wealth is troubling for me. We've made it hard for smaller entrepreneurs during this pandemic. Big businesses have profited, and smaller businesses, which I would consider someone who is a landlord. You, instead of selling your first house, when you were able to buy your second house, you decided to rent your first house out because that was a way that you saw to start to generate some legacy wealth and all of those things. Those people weren't considered when this stay of evictions happened. And I do believe the stay of evictions was warranted, but it was only dealing with one piece of the problem. Because for the landlord, those mortgages and the expenses still became due. And I was a former landlord and had a tenant. The utilities were in my name. When he decided to stop paying his rent, not only did I have to not have that rental income, which I was using to help pay the mortgage, I was then on the hook for his utilities. Absolutely. And it was against the law for me to cut those utilities off. And so I was basically paying for him. And he was laid back in the cut, doing what he was doing. Now, I don't think that's the overwhelming sentiment. I think mostly people just want an opportunity to thrive and, you know, take care of their families and have their own version of the American dream. But the stay of evictions, in my opinion, even the way it was implemented in my state, initially only dealt with one piece of the pie. We did something extra in Michigan, which is they implemented relief for landlords. Sure. And they said the state began paying back rents for people. Because the problem with the stay of evictions is it ultimately didn't really help the person if ultimately the money would ultimately come due. So people are now going to have to deal with the impact on their credit report, which is going to impact their ability for future rentals and all these other things. We've got to stop with the fast food fix for our problems and start to deal systemically and structurally with the fact, and I go back to, we have placed a hierarchy on the value of human life. Absolutely. And we just systemically place lower value on the lives of the working poor. And this pandemic has exposed that. Housing insecurity in America is unacceptable. Well, I mean, it's just unacceptable.
Everybody needs a base. Everybody needs a base. I've got 30 seconds for you, Dr. Wolf. You got it.
Sure. So thanks for your time. I would say one other thing which we seem to have forgotten, which is we tried to keep people in their homes so they wouldn't get sick and get other people sick. So it was an ask from the government in an extreme time not to exercise your right to push someone out onto the street even if they don't pay you, because that person is in effect potentially dangerous to the entire community as well as to their health. So we should keep that in mind here, right? It wasn't just a
15
freebie for guys who love the couch, right? So it is important to keep that in mind. Everyone who is sick and was forced out because their job wouldn't give them the day or they couldn't have a place to go became a cruise missile working its way through our society, sickening and potentially killing old people, people with various health conditions, and materially damaging the ability of our health system to care for people with any kind of ailment, COVID or not. So I do think we kind of have to start there. And I think we keep losing that. I think we're so bad at caring for each other or thinking about needs beyond our own that we just keep pretending that COVID's over or it's not that big a deal. And nothing has hurt us more. And I think maybe now that we put our hand on the stove 5 times, I think maybe we don't put it on a 6th time. I think there's something to be said for an upward sloping learning curve if possible. And look, I appreciate learning from your guests. I appreciate Pete. You know, it's good to keep things in mind, and there are always multiple perspectives, and there's always people who are suffering, even in the things we do to try to alleviate suffering. And it's good to keep that in mind as well. So thank you for your time today, and look forward to next week already.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. And let's create a floor beneath which no human being should fall, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson. Love you all. See you tomorrow.